What if silence wasn't weakness, but the loudest statement you've ever made? She expected you to chase, to explain, to plead, but instead you said nothing. No reaction, no drama, just quiet. And that silence, it echoed louder than any argument ever could. She didn't expect it, because when a man walks away in silence, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, it forces a confrontation not with him, but with herself. You see, it's not your words that shake someone. It's your absence, your discipline, your refusal to beg. And while she may pretend it doesn't hurt, deep down she feels the weight of your withdrawal. Because you didn't try to prove your worth, you simply became it. Right now, you're standing at a crossroads. Stay silent and grow stronger, or break that silence and fall right back into the cycle. The power, it's yours. The choice, also yours. So if you're ready to master the art of stillness, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications and comment below. My silence speaks for me. Let's begin. Number 1. Silence isn't absence, it's a return to yourself. There comes a moment when words no longer serve you. You've explained yourself, defended your intentions, tried to fix what was never built to last. But the more you spoke, the less you were heard, and now, finally, you've stopped. Not out of anger, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. This silence isn't passive. It's not the void after chaos. It's a decision. A firm, deliberate return to your center. Because when you choose to no longer react, when you stop justifying your worth, you reclaim something far more valuable than closure. You reclaim your energy. The world sees silence as weakness. They expect noise, explanations, conflict. But Stoicism tells another story. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And that's what silence allows. It shifts your focus from convincing others to simply becoming. You are no longer concerned with proving your value. You are too busy living it. Silence is not a lack of emotion, it's the ultimate act of self-respect. You are no longer handing out fragments of your attention to someone who made your presence feel disposable. You're no longer reacting to tests disguised as affection. You're no longer playing a role in a script you didn't write. Picture a fire that once raged in the open. It kept everyone warm, even those who never brought wood. But now you've let it die down. And in the cold, they notice what they lost. The heat of your presence, the light of your effort, the comfort they once took for granted. You didn't vanish to be seen. You vanished because you finally saw things clearly. And this decision, this dignified silence, confuses them. They expected you to reach out, to break first, to fold under the discomfort of distance. But instead, you've folded inward, toward your peace, toward the version of you that no longer needs to beg to be chosen. This isn't the end of your voice, it's the rebirth of your power. In silence, you are not hiding, you are sharpening, grounding. You've chosen healing over noise, growth over validation, and evolution over ego. Let them wonder, let them feel the quiet. You're not lost, you're simply no longer available to people who needed your pain to validate their comfort. Leave a mark not with a message, but with your absence. I don't go silent to disappear, I go silent to return home. Number 2, they never expected you'd stay silent this long. At first, they thought your silence was temporary, a tactic, a pause in the game they assumed you were still playing. Maybe you needed time to cool off. Maybe you were waiting for them to notice, but deep down, they believed you'd come back. Because that's what you've always done. Reached out, explained, made peace. But not this time. This time, your silence is different. It's not rooted in anger or manipulation, it's anchored in acceptance. You're not stepping back to provoke a reaction. You're stepping out because you've finally recognized the cost of staying. And that unsettles them. because the person who once made them feel irreplaceable has now become unreachable. Not out of cruelty, but because you've evolved beyond the need for their validation. They don't know what to do with the stillness. Your absence wasn't part of their plan. They thought they had time to decide, time to test you, time to leave the door half open. But your silence has closed it without announcement. Quietly, completely. And now they're left with a question they never prepared for. What if this is it? Stoicism teaches us that our power lies in our response, or our refusal to respond. As Epictetus said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. You've claimed that freedom not with noise, but with a boundary that cannot be negotiated. You no longer exist in the emotional economy they were used to controlling. Your silence becomes the proof they never expected. Proof that you meant what you didn't say, that you've stepped off the stage, that the script has changed, and you're no longer a character in a story written by indecision. And now they feel the shift, not in your words, but in your absence. The lighthouse that once guided them through chaos has gone dark, not to punish, but to stop wasting light on someone who never planned to dock. This is where silence becomes truth. Not the kind you argue, but the kind you feel. The kind that creates space too wide to cross without accountability. Let them sit in it. Let them see what it means when someone truly walks away, not with a slammed door, but with a quiet that never looks back. Don't pause to be chased. I stop because I've arrived at peace. Number 3, when you go quiet, the truth gets loud. There's a strange shift that happens when you stop speaking, not just verbally, but emotionally. When you stop explaining, defending, and reaching out, the noise fades, and in that silence, something unexpected rises. The truth. Because as long as you were speaking, they didn't have to listen. As long as you kept giving, they didn't have to question what they were offering. But now, with nothing to respond to, no messages, no apologies, no late-night "Are you okay?" they're left with themselves, their choices, their patterns, their inconsistencies. You've become a mirror they can't look away from. Your silence reflects what words never could, the gaps they never filled, the accountability they never took, the comfort they mistook for permanence. And for the first time, they have to reckon with the fact that your presence wasn't endless, that the access they once took for granted is gone, not angrily, not loudly, but absolutely. Stoicism calls us to confront the reality beneath the performance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, and in your silence you've taken back that power. You're no longer trying to shape their perception or soften your exit. You're simply gone, and in that space, the weight of their actions has nowhere to hide. They begin to feel what they once dismissed. The texts they ignored now echo back at them. The emotional labor they overlooked now becomes visible, not because you said anything, but because you finally stopped saying everything. This silence isn't about revenge. It's not cold or calculated. It's the natural consequence of unreciprocated effort. You're not punishing them. You're just no longer volunteering your energy to someone who didn't value its cost. And that's what makes it powerful, because it forces clarity. It breaks the loop. It removes the false comfort of your guaranteed return. It places the burden of reflection entirely on them, and whether they confront it or not, that's not your concern anymore. You've already done your part. Now, you're not part of the noise. You're the quiet that haunts it. I no longer speak for clarity. I let silence reveal what words never could. Number 4, silence isn't to hurt them. It's to heal you. There's a misconception about walking away quietly, that it's cold, passive-aggressive, or designed to make someone chase you. But the truth is, when you go silent, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation, it's the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself. You're not punishing them, you're protecting what's left of you. You've tried the conversations, you've bent your boundaries to keep the peace. You've waited for change, for accountability, for something to prove that your effort mattered. And when it didn't come, you realized something essential. Continuing to speak was costing you more than the silence ever could. So you stopped. Not because you didn't care, but because caring had become exhausting. Because every word you spoke was met with deflection or dismissal. Because there's a line between love and self-erasure, and you finally saw it. This is where Stoicism offers clarity. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And in your case, living, fully, freely, truthfully, required you to leave behind what kept you shrinking. The silence you've chosen isn't bitter, it's sacred. It's the space you need to breathe again. They may take it personally. They may interpret your quiet as punishment, as manipulation. But that says more about how they viewed your presence than the reality of your withdrawal. You didn't disappear to wound them. You simply stopped bleeding for someone who never noticed you were hurting. And in that shift, you begin to regenerate. You begin to hear your own thoughts again, not the filtered versions edited to please. You begin to act, not from emotional fatigue, but from renewed clarity. The stillness becomes your reset button, your sanctuary, your proof that not every battle needs to be fought with words. Let them spin their stories, let them reach whatever conclusion helps them sleep. You're not responsible for their interpretations, you're responsible for your peace. And sometimes peace requires exit, not explanation. Because true growth isn't loud, it's the quiet rebuilding of self in the aftermath of prolonged neglect. You're not hiding, you're recovering. You're not punishing, you're prioritizing. And when someone finally sees that your absence wasn't an attack, but a decision made in the name of self-respect, they'll understand they were never the one being silenced. They were simply the noise you no longer needed. I didn't go quiet to punish. I went quiet to breathe. Number 5, you don't need closure, you need clarity. You've been waiting for that final conversation, the one where everything makes sense, where they apologize, where you part ways with peace instead of confusion. You tell yourself you need it, to move on, to let go, to find answers. But the truth is, you already have all the information you need. They showed you, not with words but with patterns, with absence, with how they handled your vulnerability. Closure isn't an event, it's a decision. And the longer you wait for someone else to give it to you, the longer you stay trapped in a story that has already ended. You think a proper goodbye will soothe the ache, but that ache isn't about them. It's about your resistance to finality. You're still hoping that one more message, one more explanation, one more honest moment will undo the unraveling. But the unraveling already happened. Stoicism strips away illusion. It asks, what do I control? And in this moment, the only thing you truly hold power over is your response. Not their silence, not their regret, just your own commitment to stop giving your emotional energy to someone who's already turned the page. It's not closure you need, it's courage. The courage to stop reading between the lines and start accepting what's been plainly written. They left. Or worse, they stayed, physically while emotionally retreating. Either way, they are no longer showing up, and your life cannot remain paused, waiting for permission to continue. You don't need their recognition to validate your worth. You don't need their explanation to confirm what you already know in your gut. And you don't need their remorse to release yourself from this loop. That's your job now. To draw a line, to declare the end, to build a wall where the door used to be, not to block love out forever, but to protect your peace long enough to rebuild. The final word doesn't need to come from their mouth. It can come from your silence. From the moment you decide that dignity matters more than closure, that peace is worth more than understanding, that their inability to end things with grace doesn't mean you can't start again with strength. Because the strongest endings aren't spoken, they are walked out with quiet resolve. I don't wait for closure, I create clarity and move forward. Number 6. The silence that breaks the pattern. There was always a rhythm to your connection. You'd go quiet for a while, maybe after a fight or when you felt drained. Then, like clockwork, you'd circle back. A message, a like, a subtle gesture to reopen the door, to re-establish the link. And they knew it. They relied on it. Your return became the cue that everything was still in orbit. You could be hurt, disappointed, even ignored, but eventually, you'd come back. Until now, this time is different. You haven't said a word, not out of pride, not to manipulate, but because something in you finally snapped, not in anger, but in awareness. You saw the cycle for what it was, emotional repetition with no real growth, a loop of absence and return that drained you each time it restarted, and you understood that real change, real self-respect, doesn't come from pausing the cycle, it comes from ending it. Now, this silence isn't a pause, it's a boundary. It's not the prelude to a reunion, it's the beginning of a new identity, one that no longer tolerates being an option, a fallback, or an emotional placeholder. You're not in the waiting room anymore. You've walked out, quietly, completely. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control the nature of others, but we can control the standards we uphold. A Stoic man doesn't chase patterns, he breaks them. Not with force, but with stillness. Because in stillness he gains clarity. He sees how many of his wounds were reopened not by betrayal, but by his own returns. You don't need to announce that this time is final. You don't need to prove that you've changed. Your absence will do the talking. Your non-response will speak louder than any confrontation. And slowly, that silence will unsettle them. Not because of what it says, but because of what it refuses to say. They'll realize they're no longer in control of the emotional rhythm. That the old playbook no longer applies. And while they may question it, analyze it, even mock it, that's none of your concern. You've already made the shift from reactive to resolute. This isn't you pulling away, this is you planting your feet. This silence isn't part of the cycle, it's the end of it. Number 7. When you leave in silence, they finally hear the clock. They always thought they had time, that they could keep you on the shelf, just within reach, that you'd wait quietly in the background, always available, always understanding, always one message away. They believed your presence was permanent, your patience infinite. They believed that because you taught them that. Through every return, every reply, every moment of softness after silence. But something has changed. This time there is no message, no hint of re-entry, no noise to suggest you're still orbiting around their inconsistency, and for the first time they hear something they've never paid attention to before: time running out. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins subtly, a realization that your name isn't appearing where it used to, that they're no longer the audience for your thoughts, your life, your presence. Then it grows. A dull ache that turns into questions. Where are you? Why haven't you come back? Why does this silence feel different? And that's when it sinks in. They didn't just lose your attention, they lost your availability. Your patience expired, and your silence, once seen as a phase, now feels permanent, not as punishment, but as consequence. Stoicism doesn't seek revenge, it seeks clarity. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." And this was one of yours, not just losing someone you once loved, but accepting they never valued the time you gave, and making the unflinching decision to stop offering it. You're not trying to make them miss you. That would still place your power in their hands. No, your silence is not for them. It's for you, a sacred withdrawal. A refusal to continue where you are no longer met. You've stopped looking back because there's nothing left to return to. And the clock they once ignored now ticks louder in your absence. Every minute you stay silent becomes a moment they realize can't be undone. There's no speech that will fix what they allowed to wither, no grand gesture that will restore what was taken for granted too many times. Because now they know, your silence doesn't mean you're coming back, it means you've already left. I didn't leave to be chased. I left because my time is not renewable. Number 8. Silence isn't withdrawal, it's evolution. There's a point in every journey where something no longer fits. A conversation, a dynamic, a version of you that tolerated less than you deserved. At first it feels like resistance, like you're walking away from something familiar, but what you're really doing is growing out of it. And growth, when it's real, doesn't announce itself with noise. It comes quietly, like the way a tree outgrows the pot it was planted in. Your silence isn't a retreat, it's not a sulk, it's not bitterness wrapped in strategy, it's transformation. You've spent enough time in spaces that required you to shrink, enough time explaining your heart to people who never tried to understand its language. Now you've chosen something else, not to fight, not to beg, but to rise. They may not understand it. They may call you cold, detached, different. That's because they only knew the version of you who stayed, who softened, who overextended. They never met this version, the one who chose himself, the one who finally looked in the mirror and saw a man deserving of peace. Stoicism teaches this kind of change, not with fury, but with focus. Marcus Aurelius said, "Let not your mind run on what you lack as much as on what you have already." And what you now have is distance, perspective, power. You no longer need their approval, their affection, their clarity, because the man you're becoming can't grow in the shadow of someone else's indifference. Picture your past self like a coat you've outworn. It once kept you warm, once made sense, but now it's too tight, too familiar, too heavy. You didn't throw it away in anger, you simply took it off because it no longer fit the man you're becoming. And when they come looking, because eventually they won't find the version of you they remember, not because you're hiding, but because you've moved on, not to someone else, not to a better place, but to a higher version of yourself. Your silence is not absence, it's arrival. I don't disappear to be missed, I evolve to be unrecognizable. Number 9. Not reacting is the strongest move you'll ever make. They expect a reply, a reaction, a flare of emotion that proves they still matter, that they still have access, because for so long your reactions were their feedback loop, confirmation that they still held a piece of you, that no matter what they did, you'd respond. And that response meant control. But not this time. You've chosen silence not as avoidance, but as sovereignty. You've made peace with not getting the last word, not setting the record straight, not winning the emotional exchange. Because in Stoicism, the goal isn't to appear strong, it's to be unshakable. And real strength often looks like stillness. When you stop reacting, you break the cycle, you end the emotional script they've memorized. Provoke, retreat, return. You rewrite the story, not by changing them, but by refusing to play your part. And in that refusal, you reclaim the one thing they never thought you'd protect, your peace. There's a quiet dignity in not defending yourself, in letting misunderstandings stand uncorrected, in choosing inner calm over external clarity. This is the mark of someone who's no longer driven by the need to be heard, but by the need to be whole. They may escalate, try harder, push boundaries to trigger a spark from you, but silence is not weakness, it's a wall. And every time you don't respond, that wall gets stronger, not to keep them out, but to keep you in, to keep you grounded in your decision to no longer be moved by the emotional turbulence of others. Think of your restraint like a blade you've forged through discipline. You've sharpened it by walking away instead of arguing, by letting go instead of clinging, by refusing to let chaos bait you back into a space you've outgrown. They'll feel the shift, not in what you say, but in what you no longer entertain, not in what you defend, but in what you now ignore. And that silence will say everything. Because the man who does not react cannot be controlled, and the man who cannot be controlled becomes unforgettable. My silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of self-mastery. Number 10. Silence isn't how it ends, it's how you begin again. Most people see silence as the end, the absence after a breakup, the void after the last message, the closing scene before the credits roll. But silence, when chosen with intention, is not where things die. It's where something entirely new is born. Not with her, with you. When you stop responding, stop explaining, stop clinging to conversations that only echo back your emptiness, you create the conditions for transformation. What feels like an ending is simply the clearing of a field, the quiet before rebuilding. You're no longer feeding a dynamic that drained you. You're no longer participating in cycles that cost you your peace. That silence is space, and within that space you begin again. This isn't about proving anything. It's not about showing her what she lost or making her realize your worth. That would still be about her. No, this is different. This is the chapter where your life becomes yours again, where your energy gets redirected toward what you're building, not what you're grieving. Where you realize that healing doesn't begin with someone returning, it begins when you stop waiting. Stoicism doesn't teach us to suppress emotion. It teaches us to master it. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's the path now. You've spent enough time reacting. Now you act, with purpose, with direction, with unshakable clarity. They may never know how deeply you felt, how many nights you wrestled with silence before choosing it, how hard it was to walk away without a scene, without a speech, without a goodbye, but they don't need to know. That truth is yours, and it's sacred. And while they may remember you as the one who went quiet, what matters is what you did with that quiet. You turned it into growth, into discipline, into a new identity no longer built on needing to be chosen. You chose yourself. That's the real beginning, the moment when you stop waiting for peace from someone else and create it within. The moment when you become the source of your own closure, your own clarity, your own calm. This silence isn't a finish line, it's a foundation. I didn't go quiet to disappear. I went quiet to become. You started this journey thinking silence was just avoidance, but now, you know, your silence was a message, a mirror, and it broke her not because you vanished, but because you refused to lose yourself trying to be understood. She thought you'd reach out. Instead, you reached within, and what you found was strength. She didn't break you. She revealed what needed rebuilding. If you're ready to keep becoming that grounded, untouchable version of yourself, like this video, subscribe and comment. I am my own foundation. Stay calm, stay grounded, because real power doesn't speak, it stands.